and we were playing a lot of bars during the week. I was playing in bars and going to high school. And we opened for Metallica when I was in high school, and I went to high school the next day. The funniest thing about that is in this same house here, we were playing in a theater in Port Jervis, opening for Metallica and Overkill, and the people from Megaforce contacted me because Metallica needed somewhere to stay, and my mother wouldn't let Metallica stay in the house.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 2020. My name is Cory Peza, and here as sometimes once again we're missing another member. Ben has had to hobble off somewhere for some who knows. He's hurt himself again as usual. But Siobhán Cronin is here, and I must say happy birthday and thank you for spending your birthday here.
Yeah, so as everyone may notice, if you're watching the YouTube, I am in a different spot. We are about to depart on tour, but without going too far into that, we did this week have my dear friend Chris Caffery of Savatage, TSO, his own solo projects. I haven't seen him in so long, as I used to play with him in TSO back in the day, but it was really, really cool to have him tell his story.
Yeah, and kind of a treat for me, and I didn't bring it up on the podcast, but that the TSO DVDs have been like a family tradition. I remember getting them at some point, and I might have bought it for myself, but my parents definitely stole it, and they watch it every year at Christmas. So it's been a huge part of my life, and TSO is such they're beyond the level of like a big band. They're just their own unique thing, and Chris talks about the humble beginnings through the global sensation that they are now. So it's a really interesting episode.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Part 1 with Chris Caffery. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of 2020. My name is Siobhán Cronin. I'm here, as always, with Benny Goodman and Cory Peza, my friends, my cohorts, my Lost Symphony bandmates. Hey!
As they say in Mahwah, New Jersey.
And today we have a dear, dear friend of mine who I've spent time on stage with many times, Chris Caffery of TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Savatage, many other things, incredible
solo
person.
Artist.
Solo artist.
Yes, I play with myself a lot.
He was with Big Mouth in 1988, so don't forget that.
He's not even going to get a word in here.
That 88, wait, it was 88. That was 88. Some people know more about me than me. I was with every band on Atlantic that needed a guitar player from 87 through 90. It was one of those things. I toured with Savatage, and then I was kind of side stage rhythm guitar player, keyboard player experiment, and then Atlantic saw me and liked me and threw me into Big Mouth, where I actually met some friends that kind of did that, but then Atlantic put me into Dirty Looks, and then me and the singer in Dirty Looks didn't get along very well. So they were doing the Turn of the Screw record, and they actually had a really big push that was about to happen for that band, and Atlantic was having home run after home run with Beau Hill as a producer, and the president of Atlantic wanted Dirty Looks to use Beau, and the singer in Dirty Looks, God, I don't like to speak evil about the dead, but he was basically a jackass sometimes, but he didn't want to listen to Atlantic's advice. Atlantic flew us from the East Coast to LA, spent like $50,000 to record 2 songs with Beau.
Wow.
Just to see how it went. I really liked it. He was putting in a lot of his background vocal styles, the stuff you heard in Rat and Kicks and that kind of stuff, into Dirty Looks. And it was still Dirty Looks, but the singer said it was homogenized. He hated it. So he went and said no to it, and I guess the president of Atlantic was really close with Beau at the time, and that didn't go over well. And that singer, long story short, he put a cigarette out on my arm when I was driving our rental car on that 101 in California, just to see what it would do. He was that kind of he wasn't the most charming individual, so he kind of had a sound that he wanted, and I was 19 years old. Nobody told me what to do then, and I just didn't really get along with him that well. So he said, we're going to play things my way or no way, and I was like, fine, I'll do it no way. So I did the basic tracks for Turn of the Screw and wrote a couple riffs and some songs on the record, and I bailed. And I think they redid the rhythms in a different studio anyway, and I never got credited for my songs. It was funny. There was one part in the song that was in like F sharp, and the singer didn't credit me for it. He's like, well, it's just natural. The song would have went to F sharp there. I'm like, yeah. So every song riff I ever wrote that you naturally would have been something that went in that direction. But
well, can I ask you something? Because you mentioned you got $50,000 to do 2 songs, and now we're in 2022, and you're lucky if you got $50,000 to do 2 albums. Like,
exactly.
Can you give us like a perspective of what it used to be like? Because now everybody. I mean, I'm in my basement, right? I have a studio down here. It looks cool.
Me too.
That's what.
Yeah, we got to talk about your
do.
basement too
I have
when
a
we
studio
get
down
to
here,
it.
but I have a studio and a full bar. There's 12 pinball machines, but you can't see all of. Only 4 of them are on right now. But I quit drinking, but there's a lot of booze here. If anybody ever wants to come and get hammered,
all right.
I got like 200 bottles of all kinds, every kind of liquor on the planet. Because once I stopped drinking, I was just like, oh, I just want to buy all these bottles of booze, so I have them. So now I have all these different boozes here, and they look cool. Because that's, it's all about the look.
For sure. Well, it looks amazing. Like for anyone that is listening to the.
It's called the Silver Dollar Saloon, and it's called that for a reason. I'll go get them while we're speaking. But there's 3 silver dollars here, and this house was built, I think, in the early 1960s. It's my family's house. We moved here in like '83. And I came back home, I think it was 2007, because the place I lived in the city, the landlord, she was actually the daughter of my old landlord of a lot of places. I lived in Astoria, and she was getting married and decided she needed the house. And I lived in this house for 5 years with no lease, because I was just kind of like a family friend kind of thing with those. And she knocked on the door one day, and she's like, I need the house. And I'm like, when? She's like, the end of the month. So I had a European tour coming up, and I dumped everything back home up here at my family's house, and went on the road. And then when I got back home, I realized my mom was here, how much she really couldn't do by herself. So I just decided to stay, and I took it over, and I built my bar and my studio, and I got a barn and a beach and a golf course in my backyard, and I just hang out and hide from the world. But the Silver Dollar Saloon name came because there's a little room over to my right that we built into a bathroom that used to be a dark room, because the people that lived here the one guy was a photographer back when we actually used film, so it was a dark room in that. And we ripped the ceiling off to put a new one in, and he had in the sheetrock, he had weird things hidden. There was a bank envelope that had these 3 silver dollars in it, and then there was this other envelope that had a bunch of like love letters from his dad to his dad's wife that were written during a war. It was like some really weird stuff were in the ceiling, but that's what became the Silver Dollar Saloon. But that's just where I was hanging it. Everybody got trapped during the pandemic. It's like, I really didn't have it that bad because I have almost everything you need. There's everybody here but people. It was like, when Blazing Saddles, when they built the other rock ridge, and they're like, we're missing people. It's like, that's
wasn't Blazing Saddles canceled? You can't even watch that. Do you remember that on television when they used to edit Blazing Saddles?
I was on an airplane flight. It was not very long ago, probably within the last 5 years, and Blazing Saddles was the movie on the flight, and it was unedited. It was an unedited.
Well, that's wild considering they're trying to cancel Gone with the Wind at one point, I was hearing. And like, that's a period piece. Like, there was racism.
Guys know I have that little elephant, Wilbur versus Wilbur's the metal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Wilbur.
On your Instagram, Wilbur makes appearances.
Wilbur goes everywhere.
We do sea glass stuff. Like, this is a sea glass birdhouse. And
wow.
Sometimes
that's cool. Check out the YouTube.
I can't really draw, but I can make almost any cartoon character. You guys know who this is?
Is it? That's not Casper the Ghost. It's the other guy.
I'm Cereal.
Booberry, right? Booberry?
Oh, Booberry.
Yeah. Booberry.
Yeah, Booberry.
Luckily, he was blue, or he wouldn't be able to have his name,
They released that like a limited edition.
The knees off the Land O'Lake chick. I was just like, the Land O'Lake container and the chick off of it. Were you guys as twisted as we were when we were kids, we used to take the Land O'Lakes container and we would cut the cardboard and leave a flap at the top of the chick's chest. This is like, little kid. And we cut the knees off and put them underneath to tape it to the back. So when you opened up the flap, there was like boobs. And that's, and then all of a sudden the chick was too racist to put on the thing because she was an Indian. And I'm like, God, you took away a kid's opportunity to make knee boobs.
Well, it shows you the difference in generations.
Yeah, I know.
Because you did that with the Land O'Lakes.
There's probably generations of knee boobs just totally affected by that whole situation. Because we didn't, we were like innocently evil back then. It's not like nowadays where you got like freaking.
It's like internet evil. Everyone like trying to take down the world online.
I was just about to say like different generations. Like, so you're fucking with the Land O'Lakes box. I'm like, I remember stealing my mom's Victoria's Secret magazines that she would get to sell whatever. And then watching internet porn go like this. You know what I mean? And it tells you, like with my dial-up modem, my mom's like, why can't I make a call? It's like, Mom, I'm looking at boobs. I've been waiting for 47 minutes. Like on my Mac Plus.
It went reverse directions too, because then the internet came and then the strip club numbers went down, 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 down. Because all the girls were like, oh, wait, I don't have to be around people naked to make money. I just get them to throw me $20 a month. Here's
Onlyfans.com.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It totally killed a perfectly, well, at least for us when we were on the road, it was a perfectly busy, business in this country. They were all over the place. I mean, and then they just all closed down. But I heard it's on the way back again. But I don't know. I haven't been to one in a long time because I haven't been anywhere in a long time.
Well, there's also the internet and COVID, so you could just go on your camera and do anything for anyone anywhere live, and it's just like, here's the transactional money. I don't have to touch your $100 bills with the cocaine. I just get your Bitcoin and your
but I think after COVID, that everyone's over with the internet, Bitcoin, so it probably is a surge again.
You could get Bitcoin in an ATM. I mean, what? Explain that. I guess you add extra Bitcoin. I don't really do the Bitcoin thing.
I have no idea.
Really
That's above
either.
my pay grade.
Even Bitcoin experts can't explain it.
Right.
I can't even afford a Bitcoin according to the internet. I think they're like, I don't even know how much, 27
about
grand
40,
or something for
about
a Bitcoin.
46 or 47 grand at the moment.
How rich are you now, Cory?
Not that rich.
Look, I'm not rich on it either. I had a friend of mine who's like, look, I need help. If you buy Bitcoins, I get a bonus of money. So I bought some Bitcoins with him to give him a bonus of money, and it went down like 60%. And I'm like, oh, thanks.
Like, now I look like the asshole.
That whole business that was like early in 2021, and it sucked ass since then. I mean, those things are not. I told everybody, I said I would be really cautious about that because eventually you're trying to replace real money with that money. Somebody's going to regulate it, and then everything's going to go to zero. And there's going to be Bitcoin Central that's going to have control, and all these people that sank all this money into these things. I always tell them, I'm like, if you made it, take it out. It might take me 60 years to get back that 60% that I lost, giving that guy a fucking, I don't know what he got, like a $10 bonus for me signing up for Bitcoin, and I wound up losing like, I don't know, I only put in like $400, but it's down to like 200 and I don't even know where I'm at. I'm below. I forget.
It's a gamble.
I've lost hundreds, and he made $10. That's all I know.
Well, before we go too far,
I was able to write it off, though. I was able to write off that loss. So
there you go.
Makes it sting a little less.
More work than it was probably worth. But I want to go back because, not to that this isn't interesting, but I want to talk a little bit about you in that you started your career super early. And I wonder if you could talk about that. I mean, touring or recording albums already when you're 19 and like being sort of in the scene already. How did you get started, and like how did your career take off so early?
Fake ID. I'm serious. Everybody laughs. I'm dead serious. I'm dead, and I'm not. Kids, don't try this at home. And it's funny because we actually never continued speaking about, because I went on a tangent, but we never continued speaking about how much different the industry.
Well, we can go back to that. Yeah, that's great.
The industry was a lot different back then in many ways. I mean, completely different. New York then New Jersey had a scene that was just as happening, but in a different way as Hollywood and LA. I mean, bands like Twisted Sister would play all week long. They would have their crews on salary. Those guys would play all week long, all year long. And the clubs were really, really happening 7 nights a week in New York. And there was a really big hangout scene. I started playing bars probably when I was 15, 16. First time I played, I was 13. My mom had to go. It was an Elks Club in Ridgewood, New Jersey. But my club band, which was called Anti, was a band with my brother, A-N-T-I, and we trademarked the name, and it's pissed off a lot of people that have tried to use it. But we were always looking for a singer for our band, and we had a bunch of different singers. It was a good band, and we were playing a lot of bars during the week. I was playing in bars and going to high school next. We opened for Metallica when I was in high school, and I went to high school the next day. The funniest thing about that is in this same house here, we were playing in a theater in Port Jervis opening for Metallica and Overkill, and the people from Megaforce contacted me because Metallica needed somewhere to stay, and my mother wouldn't let Metallica stay in the house. Yeah.
That was probably a smart decision, man.
Well, I probably would have had a completely different career route now, but there probably would have been a lot of help that may have happened at certain points. But we did the show, and my singer at the time, this guy named Blaze, he was like a really screwed up in the head Southern guy, and he brought in pyro and lit it off when we were on stage, and Metallica kicked us off stage. I remember the sign that their crew guy, this huge crew guy, was standing on the side of the stage. The sign says, "This is your last song."
Oh, jeez.
So we got opened for Metallica, got kicked off the stage, and I guarantee if my mom let them stay at the house, we wouldn't have got thrown off the stage for the pyro. They probably would have let us use pyro, being like, "Fuck yeah, man, let's crash the house." So
it changed everything.
We got thrown off the stage. But at that point in time, the drinking age in New York was 19. And when I was turning 17, the drinking age went to 21. My brother, who was the drummer in my band, he was 19. Now, how New York did it at that time was you could still go to the bars. You were grandfathered in at 19. And there was no photo licenses then. So my brother got a photo license. I had his non-photo license, a credit card, and a social security card at 17. We would go to clubs. I'd go in first as long as I made it. I looked fucking 10. As long as we made it past the security guys, he would follow me 10 minutes later, 15. There was always a line to get in with his photo ID, and these guys never check names. So it always.
So you just had to look like you owned it, like you were supposed to be. Tell everybody, because there's a whole generation that don't understand what it's like to actually sneak in with a bullshit fake ID.
Are we
like
trying to encourage this?
It's a great
real fake IDs.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, you know what? Because so many people were 19 going to 21. I was 17. I wasn't that much different. It wasn't like the 16-year-old kid trying to get in the 21-year-old place or the 14-year-old kid. I was just basically a 17-year-old pretending to be 19. So it wasn't like a huge thing. But I wasn't drinking. I didn't even drink until I joined Savatage. So it wasn't like I was going in there and drinking underage. I just wanted to see. I was seeing a lot of bands at that time that I got to see. Things like Rondinelli when Ray Gillen was singing in there, and I became friends with Ray through hanging out with that. And there was just so many great bands that you would see in those clubs at that time that you wouldn't have seen anywhere else if you couldn't get them. But those places were open all those nights of the week. They let you play there at that age, because my brother was there kind of as like my chaperone, but to hang out, you had to have the ID. So we were at a place in New York City that there was a really cool hangout place. Because New York City had there were 7 nights of the week that you could go out. In New York City, 7 identical places. Like every week, you would go this place on a Monday. This place. Every place had their certain night. And on Thursday in New York City, in this building in Times Square that had the news going around it. It's right at the corner of Times Square and 42nd Street. It had a club called Nirvana. It was an Indian restaurant that at night on Thursdays turned into a rock club, and it was a really cool place. Everybody would be there. I mean, anybody that was anybody in New York City at that time would show up there. It was 2 floors, and they had a stage with the glass window overlooking the city. It was awesome. But at that point in time, I had met the band Heaven up there, the singer from the band Heaven, who I actually had just saw. I think it was probably New Year's into 87. I had just saw them playing at a club in Queens called Lemoore East. There was 2 Lemoores, and I was friends with Ray, and I was hanging out, and that was actually the first night I ever met Paul O'Neill. And this guy with the leather jacket and the white shirt and black pants showed up and said hello and walked away, and I met Heaven, and Heaven had that Knocking on Heaven's Door single at the time, the one that kind of Guns N' Roses Swears was their idea for an arrangement, the heavy metal version of that tune, which the Heaven version was awesome, but Heaven and CBS kind of had like a falling out. I don't remember exactly what the reasons were. Kind of similar reasons to the way Dirty Looks were, where, you know, label wanted something, band wanted something else, and then so I heard that Mitch Perry, their guitar player, left, and I knew this, and I'm 17. So it's funny because I was watching your video with Nuno, and he's talking about how he was young and was like, I'm going to get in Ozzy. You know, Heaven wasn't Ozzy, but I was like, you know, I walked up to the singer. I'm like, let me try to get this gig. So I gave the guy a cassette tape of my club band, this Alan Fryer, that singer. And that singer, he passed away. And I don't want to scare singers that have worked with me, but 10 singers I've worked with in my career passed away. 10 different singers, including Ray Gillen being one, but 10 different singers I've worked with.
For those that don't know, Ray Gillen from Badlands, which was such an incredible project, and Cheers to the Heavens.
He actually sang the original version of the Eternal Idol record for Sabbath. He was in Black Sabbath. And then he was in Blue Murder, but he had his own problems with the label. And David Geffen, I guess, at that point in time, he thought Ray's voice sounded thin on tape, which was weird.
Really?
They let Ray go, and they couldn't find another singer. I remember, because I was really, really good friends with Ray, and Ray told me that David Geffen invited him back because they couldn't find a singer they liked good enough to replace him. Because the idea was to make Blue Murder like the younger, new Zeppelin Whitesnake thing. And it would have been great with Sykes and Ray, but for some reason, Geffen didn't like the sound of Ray's voice on. That's how anal we were back then, where you would reject somebody like Ray Gillen. But they invited him back in, and Ray had already started working with Jakey Lee. And David Geffen put a blank check in front of Ray and said, put in an amount. And Ray ripped it up and walked out of his office. And I know that because Ray had told me that story. But I gave Alan this tape, and he told me he was flying to LA to audition some guitar players, and he would get a hold of me. While he was in the airport waiting to leave for LA, he must have went to a freaking payphone. There was no phones at the time. I got a call at my house, and it was him, and he told me he loved the tape and that he's going out to look at some people, but he doesn't really think he's going to need to take anybody he sees because he thought I was awesome. So he went to LA, which I found out I always work with the funniest people. He told my management, which was Lieber Krebs at the time, and David Krebs and Steve Lieber were managing, and Paul was producing and managing Heaven. He told them that he was flying to LA, that he needed a flight to LA to audition for a band with Rudy Sarzo that he was doing. I think it was called Driver or something. They wanted to audition Alan to sing, and Paul and them called up out to the management for Sarzo when Alan was out there and asked him how things were going with Alan Fryer, and they were like, who? So Alan just wanted the free trip to LA. So he goes out there on their dime and comes back. But I got that gig. I was 17 years old. I have my first paycheck. My first paycheck was from Paul and and David Krebs. Both I've saved checks from both of them. One was just for a reimbursement for a hotel cost somewhere, and then another was like the $150 thing I got for a studio thing that I did one day, and that was it. We wrote a couple songs, and it was cool. We did some shows on the East Coast and the West Coast. The East Coast shows, one of them we had Skid Row pre-Sebastian opening at that point in time. That was at the Lamouries too, and it was ironic because Paul O'Neill was the band's manager, and we spent all the money we made at that show on lights, which became like the thing we're known for with TSO is our lights. Paul was very but the bass player at the time was Tommy Henriksen, who you might know as
Alice Cooper's band.
Yes, he goes by a different name and a different instrument in the Alice Cooper band, but I've known Tommy since I was 17, and he was a badass bass player and actually a great singer. He had a band.
Tommy's awesome.
He had a band on Long Island called Rough Cut, and then he had his own band called TF Hunter. And I always tell you a song called Secret Lover that I could still sing. He was a badass. But that thing, it didn't work out because there was a lot of weirdness, and Alan just didn't conduct himself properly all the time, the singer. So I think it was one of those things where, the powers that be didn't necessarily really want to deal with him that much anymore. And I kind of caught heaven with that management and Paul working them at the tail end. And Paul's like, look, I'm going in the studio to work with this band called Savatage. And I love the band, but I really want to make their sound bigger. And live, I think they could use you. So it turns around where he's like, we got a Dio. I got Savatage a Dio tour because Paul knew Wendy. So Savatage was going to open for Dio and Megadeth in December of '87. And I had the gig. Or at least I thought I had a gig. So I got the Savatage records, and I knew their music from the WSOU, the metal station. They used to play Savatage a lot.
Back in Jersey,
College Station.
College Station.
And I learned every song they had. I really liked that band, and it was December, and I was getting ready to go down there to rehearse. The management, that Savatage had a guy named John Golowar who was managing the band with Paul. He called me up to tell me that Savatage took a guitar player in Florida and that they wanted to use him. And I was like, no, they didn't. I was like, no. I said, I said, I've been working on this stuff for 3 months. I think it was at that time. I said, let me go to Florida. I pay for my own plane flight. I'll go to Florida, and if they like me, pay me back. If they don't like me, I'll go back home.
How old were you at this point? How old?
I was 19.
19.
Wow, good for you.
Just one quick thing, just before we get too far into like the Savatage years. I think the biggest point we have to make is that you got your first gig at 17 off a tape. Do you have
that was with the band on Columbia Records at the time. So
do you have any idea, or like looking back, what about your playing at 17 was able to give you that leg up? Because most 17-year-old guitar players that I hear don't have something quite that special to stand out necessarily. So What was it about your style or that was on that tape that you think made them kind of have that opinion of you?
Probably just the fact that I was good and I was creative. There's something about, people that have, I'll call it the quote unquote it factor, when somebody just is not the norm. Because you watch YouTube nowadays, you see there's 700 million kids out there that blow the fuck out of me on guitar. They can play everything, sweeping, screaming, up and down, 100 miles an hour, every lick ever written. But there's not one of them out of every 1,000 that I see that I go, that guy is unique. And I think it was just something about me that stood out. Plus, I was a pretty boy, and that was a big thing about that time. They wanted you to have a certain look, but I was nice. I wasn't fucked up, and I was good at what I did for that age, and it was exceptional. I was able to play, the entire Holy Diver record when I was 15, when I was able to play the leads pretty damn close to what they were. There was some people that I thought I was playing their stuff, like Malmsteen stuff, where I was kind of playing fast, but not exactly in his arpeggios and notes. But I was a good player, and I had done those Heaven live shows that with their music that they did in New York, and I even flew out to LA the year before when I was still 18 at that time, to play with Heaven in California, and we did some shows with like Warrant opening up and out in the West Coast, and there was a lot of the people out there watching when I was an 18-year-old that were like, you should move here because you would get a lot of things from going on. But I was always a New Yorker. I was a little bit too New York to go to California and stay. So I went back and I went to Florida, and I got off the plane, and there was nobody at the airport to get me. No one showed up. They were supposed to. So I called the number I had, and the drummer's like, "Yo, just get a taxi." I was like, "Oh, this is freaking lovely." So the rehearsal place was like an hour north of the airport, and I'm in this taxi. I get there, and I get out. I'd met the guys before. They were recording in New York City with Paul, and I plugged in, and they're like, "Well, what do you want to play?" And I said, "Anything." And they're like, "Huh?" I said, "Anything." I said, "I know every one of your songs," and they had 5 records out at the time.
It's a lot, yeah.
They were like, "Get the fuck out." I said, "Any song you have, just play it." So I think they went to one of the first 2 records, a song called "The Whip" on I can't remember. Sirens and Dungeons were both recorded at the same time, but they were released at different times. So I can't remember exactly which of the 2 right now that was on, but they picked that because I guess they thought it was obscure and it would be something I didn't know. So I played through it, and it was good, and I could just see the look on their face, because me and Chris Oliva's rhythm guitar styles were almost identical. It was creepy. When we played together and you put us left and right, it sounded like him recording 2 tracks in the studio, and they could hear that in the rehearsal room. And then we played 24 hours ago, and they stopped in the middle of the song, left the room, said, "We're right back." And they said, "We weren't even planning on using the guy we had. We told," again, I always get these people to make stories up to Paul O'Neill. Like, we told him we were using this kid from Florida, but we weren't even going to use him. And they go, "This sounds fucking awesome. We want you to do this." And it just Savatage sounded better. And that was a weird thing, because Chris was such a great guitar player, but they noticed something about their band sounding better with me than without me. So I did that tour, and Chris was having a little bit of trouble with psychologically dealing with the fact that people saw another guitar player. So at first I got pushed to the side of the stage, and they pushed me off and it was just kind of like a real weird roller coaster ride. But I was 19. I was opening for Dio in arenas at 19 with Megadeth, and I was out, and it was just fun. I really didn't care.
So rolling into the audition, knowing everything through and through, every song they could possibly choose. We've heard a similar story from a previous guest, Jimmy Bell, who did that for his audition for Autograph. And it's something that kind of comes up in terms of like successful people we have on the show, is that attitude of like, go big, go home. Like if you want it, you're going to do anything you can to get it. Is that something that was specific for that gig, or is that an attitude that you've kind of had throughout your career?
I don't know. I mean, I think if I was auditioning for a band I didn't like, I'd probably only learn what I had to, but I loved Savatage's music, so I kept going on to those records because I liked it. I even stumbled through the Fight for the Rock stuff, which they don't even like. So it was kind of one of these things, and I left in the middle of that Mountain King tour, and John Oliva, I just remember saying, he goes, "I'm going to get you in this band." And, Atlantic put me into the Big Mouth 30 Looks thing. That all happened really fast when I was, just within the next like 6 months that it all happened. Because I had just turned 19 when that Savatage thing happened, so I was like 18 in 3 months, and 19 in 3 months when it happened. So I still had time before I even turned 20, and I did the Big Mouth thing, which was kind of funny. There's a video out there, the guy who directed the DJ Jazzy Jeff videos, and I got into the Dirty Looks thing, which, like you said, at that point in time, I mean, the music business was totally different. There was such a thing as artist development. Now artists have to develop themselves doing this. We kids have to be their own developers. There's no tour support. We would get incredibly large recording and tour support and video budgets back then. I mean, I'm talking $500,000 record deals, and that's on a low end, a lot of bands. And we were spending $100,000 to $200,000 a video. It was like it was a different world. But also back then, people were actually buying records, so the industry was generating the money that it needed to lose money. Now they're barely making what they need to make money, so they're not going to give you extra money because that's how the world works. There's not enough sales. So back then, Atlantic would have A&R people situated all over the country watching local bands, and that was there was people working at Atlantic that there wouldn't be a job for somebody like that now. Your job now would be to sit home and go, I just saw this on YouTube. They wouldn't fly you into Indianapolis to see the cool local band that everybody's talking about, stick you in a hotel and, and give you a dinner budget. It wouldn't happen. But, the Dirty Looks thing I was out of. And then within like a couple weeks, I think it was, because I heard Savatage was planning on getting a hold of me. The Levas called me up and they said, we want to talk to you. So I went into the studio. They were still recording at the same place they did Mountain King for Gutter Ballet. And we went to the roof of the record plant, and John and Chris Oliva were up there. And Chris Oliva was the one who said it. He's like, well, even though we think you're a dick, we want you to join the band. And that was it, and it was me who kind of screwed it up because I was still young, and I had my band with my brother, and my brother really wanted us to keep that going. And every time I did something else, I even got him into the Heaven thing, but the Heaven singer didn't like him. And it was just one of these things where I was trying to drag my brother into things and it wasn't going to happen. But I kind of left Savatage to go work with him, and I should have just stayed in Savatage. And it was just kind of a stupid decision. And I was back working with John Oliva within a year after I left anyway, because he was out of the band. But, Chris passed away, and that actually became a real pivotal moment in everybody's lives and career with Savatage, because, him dying was like, what do we do? And that's when me and John had decided to get back into the band. But there's a lot of different things that happened in that situation, but it was amazing for me to get into Savatage. I was in that band that as a member at 20, and then we did the Gutter Ballet tour when I just had turned 21, and that was a really big time on MTV 89, 90, for metal. I did the Headbangers Ball stuff, and I was doing all the press, and they liked, using me for the public stuff. Chris wasn't really at that time, he didn't really care about getting any kind of image stuff or doing that. He was just like, go ahead and do it. Me and his brother went out and did it. So they'd send me and Oliva around to make people laugh. But that was Paul O'Neill working with that then. So really that's kind of where all this ties together, because at 17 years old, Paul O'Neill was the manager producer of Heaven, and Paul was the manager producer of Savatage, and Paul was the creator of TSO. And it's just kind of like, I was lucky that at the age of 17, I was able to have that happen. And like I said, I was out in that bar in New York City that night because of the fact that I was able to use my brother's fake ID. So when
it all comes full circle. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, I always believe with anything,
fake ID came in handy.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like that with anything in life, though. It's timing is everything. I mean, it's almost as simple as you're not going to win that scratch-off ticket in that lottery machine if you're not there when that is the next ticket coming out of the machine. And it's kind of like that with just about anything in life. And it happens a lot with the music business. And, it's nowadays, it's like, I'm Savatage isn't playing at the moment. I'd love them to play, but we're not. And people are like, well, what are you doing? And it's like, I do my solo stuff and I do, TSO was playing non-holiday, but then Paul passed and he's not. And it's like, well, are you doing anything else? And it's like, to really actively pursue something that would be playing all the time, it's almost like it was when you're a kid. You got to go hang out. You got to be in the right place. Well, I'm out going. It's Tuesday night, and you're at so and so's party here. And you had to drive 2 hours to it. You can't see at night driving. It's like to find hopefully that somebody's So it's kind of one of these things. I'm happy with where I'm at. I did the new Spirits of Fire record. I'm writing a lot of music and doing a lot of art and working at home. I'm not broke. It's like I'd love to be doing the Savatage thing. That's what I'd love to do more than anything right now is if Savatage could go back and tour the world again. But, that has to come together on all fronts from all the way around or it's not going to happen. So I always sit there trying to stay positive about that. We actually wrote some music and I think we have enough to do a new record. I just don't know what is going to happen with that right now. So we're just kind of getting through it. And, TSO is finishing recording and we're going to release a lot of the unreleased stuff that was done by Paul O'Neill, because what people don't know is the best TSO record has not been released yet. And that's in my own personal opinion, but there was the very first TSO record that was ever done was this record called Romanoff that Paul was writing with John Oliva and Bob Kinkle before Christmas Eve and Other Stories was even done. But when Savatage released Dead Winter Dead and Christmas Eve Sarajevo hit the regular adult contemporary radio stations, and Atlantic is like the giant light bulb goes over their head and what could we do with this song? Paul decided to use his longtime idea for TSO on doing his Christmas trilogy first. So the Romanoff, that's the name of that record, kind of got pushed to the side. And
can we just pause for one moment? Because I remember, I'm not exactly, was it like mid 90s, early 90s, you guys had that record. I remember seeing it come on MTV and being like, because we're in a band called Lost Symphony where we have, symphonic music with all of that. And when I first heard Carol of the Bells, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my fucking life as a child. I was like, holy shit. First off, no stupid vocals. Straight to the guitar solos. And there's an orchestra. How fucking epic is this? And like you said, it's on adult contemporary radio. This is like a new sound that came out. Like, how did that feel for you being in a band that, like, honestly, you're like, does it have vocals? No. Is it pop ready? Not really. I mean, it's Tchaikovsky, but like, that was 19th century. Like the fact that you guys were so.
It was funny because we were rehearsing for the Dead Winter Dead tour of Europe in Florida, and Johnny Lee, the bass player, his dad owned an air conditioning company, and he would help his dad during the day. And he was driving from wherever he was in Tampa that day to rehearsal. And he gets in the room and he was just like, yeah, you guys aren't going to believe this. I just heard Sarajevo on Mix 96. And we all started laughing. And it was like, this was the adult contemporary station. He's like, dude, it was just on Mix 96. And first of all, I'm laughing because Sarajevo was on Mix 96, but then second of all, I was like, why is Johnny Lee listening to Mix 96? But it was kind of like, it was two parts to my thoughts at the time, but there was this, Mason Dixon was this DJ down there, and he got a hold of the song. I think it was the guitar player from Kansas or somebody said, you got to hear this. And he heard it and he played it, and it went, he said the phones went bananas where they normally would get like maybe 20 requests on a song. This was getting 300, people were just calling like crazy. And he told his friend Scott Shannon in New York City about it. Scott was at, I believe it was PLJ at the time in New York, and they played it, and it went to #1 there right in front of Atlantic, where they could turn on the radio and hear Savatage #1 requested on a huge station in New York City. So they were like, well, what do we do with the song? Because we can't really sell Christmas under the name of Savatage. And then that's when Paul said, well, let's release TSO. And he stopped having his idea of having Romanoff be the first release and just went to that. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, that's 26 years ago now this year. And, everybody's lives changed from there. I mean, we didn't have any idea what was going to happen from there. We went from playing, Savatage played 1224 live at the Mix 96 Christmas party that year. We were invited in as guests, and Bob Kinkle came down and played keyboards, and we did that. And that was the first time we played that song live in front of people. And then now we play that song, in front of 1 million people a year in arenas. And it's just it's been a crazy thing. But
you say you didn't have any idea, but like, what was your initial opinion when you first, played or heard that track? Like, was it like, oh, this is something unique? Did you think it was something unique at least?
Well, Paul knew it was. Paul had his arrangement, and he had that. I heard that when I was 17. Mm-hmm. He was trying to get other bands to do it. Paul was a big part of helping break Joan Jett and her career in the United States. He was working with her, and Joan had told me a lot of the story. So it's like, I'm not just making that up saying Paul told me something. It's like, I spoke to Joan at Paul's funeral about Paul. And he really had a lot to do with what they were doing at the time. And they used Little Drummer Boy with her singing and got it on to rock radio at Christmas time. And then in January released I Love Rock and Roll. And it was like a tool to get her name to a whole shitload of stations that were not rock ones along with the rock ones. And it just really, I think, had a lot to do with the initial snowball of that song exploding out of the gate. And he had this song, and I think he tried to get, they may have even done a demo of it, the Scorpions to record it and some other people. And, I think even Heaven had a recorded version of it, but he saw the Dead Winter Dead record for Savatage to be the perfect time, where he wrote it into the story where this cello player who was actually a real story for the war there in Sarajevo, was on top of a pile of burnt down buildings playing his cello. And that was where this song, that intro to that song, is supposed to be that guy. And our record about that war, which, now ironically there's some musicians that were out playing in this totally messed up war that's going on right now, but the song just married that record, and that's that point. So Paul finally had a chance to do it. I remember when it was funny because Oliva wanted Dead Winter Dead done so he could fly home. We were recording it in New York, and we hadn't finished the record. As soon as the recording was done, John was able to leave before the mixing. But Paul wanted to do Sarajevo. So he paid John off. I forget how much it was to stay. He gave him, John, I'll give you $5. He gave him some extra money, and he stuck around, and we did that song.
Wow.
And, it's a true story. Oliva was the first one to let it go. I always wanted to say it, but I was like, do I get in trouble? But Oliva let it go to radio and interviews, so I know that it's not something I can't say, but that's what had actually happened with that. And I remember when we were mixing the song, because I stayed in New York and Paul had a writing apartment near where I lived in Astoria, and he had a brownstone in the city, but he would go out to this place when we were finished in the studio at night, and I would go into the studio every day with him, even if I wasn't working, just to hang out. And I like being in a studio. Paul always used the biggest, coolest studios. He'd go in there, he'd let me order whatever food I wanted from every local restaurant. He's sitting there. I was like, I had my own stack of delivery things I could get. And it was always fun. But I was listening to the final mix of that song, and I told him, I said, I said, I really think there's a hit song in this thing. And he just goes, from your lips to God's, ears, boss. And that was what he said about it. But I think he always knew there was something good about that and different about that arrangement. And it just took off. I mean, and that's, the song for what became the catapult for TSO. It was like, I always say it's like, you don't know what would have happened. The timing was right, but that timing actually it worked for TSO. It worked for everybody for that to be out then. But it was definitely something that you heard into it. But I think Paul was the one who always knew that TSO was going to do what it did, because we were writing for the next Savatage record when TSO was going to do the video for Sarajevo, and the Savatage guys, we were in Florida, and he kind of did the video with silhouettes of Bob Kinkle and Petrelli, and we were talking to Paul about, we're like, Paul, we're not in the video. It's like, we're not using people in the video. So, all right, because he didn't want to have to deal with flying us to New York at that time just to do the quick thing of the video, and he's like, don't worry, when TSO plays arenas, we haven't even released the record yet. And he was telling me, don't worry about getting in videos with TSO headlines arenas. So he was just, trying to let us, like, don't worry about coming up to be a silhouette in this video where, everything's going to be huge. And
so he's a visionary through and through.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
When we were in arenas, he's like, now when TSO headlines stadiums, now, granted, you can't play a stadium in most of our markets in the wintertime, but we'll play 2 shows in Dallas and 2 shows in Cleveland in the same day and have, close to 60,000 people in one day. So TSO does stadium numbers in a single day. So he always saw it. And he's one of those people that was so driven at what he did, and he would, if somebody told him no, it would make him want to work harder to make it happen. Where a lot of people will see something as a challenge and then walk away from it. Paul would see it as a challenge, and he would have to beat it and meet it, and it just was something that always worked with that. Which it's hard for us now with TSO, because we're still keeping his legacy alive and doing what he did, but it's without, he was just such a huge part of his creation that it's one of these things where I always want to call him and ask him what's going on next, Paul. And it's like, he was that guy. He was like my dad and my brother, and if something was wrong, or if I had questions about money or politics or taxes or business deals or whatever, he would always let me listen to his experience. And then when he passed away, I'm like, who am I going to call and talk about Paul dying? I can't call Paul. And it's just, it's a real weird thing. Life has definitely not been the same for any of us since he's passed away. I mean, we're still doing what we do. We still played the tour. It's still, making money, making music, but we're making it without him. And it's different. I have to admit.
Do you think it's like a tribute now, though? Do you think that, like, you guys are playing for him as much as just continue? Because would he want this? Would he want it to be like now?
He would want us to do it. He spoke to us about that. He always wanted to keep TSO going. That's why TSO has the multiple bands, because he sees it being larger than any one sum. That's why he wasn't on the stage and doing, he did his thing, we do our thing. It's like he considered it all, one big giant thing. And I think if he would expect it to be that way. And I think that's kind of why also, even with the singers being multiple, where as time went on, he's like, who's going to be able to do this when they reach X age? If we could keep this going forever. And he just wanted to keep the music alive and, keep the art alive. And that's, I think, the thing he always said, it's just, he wanted to create the best piece of art he could. And if people liked it, then we we were being successful. But I think he always, he had that confidence about what he did, which I think people need. He was very, very sure about some things that a lot of us would go no way. He had that, like I said, that vision. I mean, the last show that we did in Europe with TSO was a TSO Savatage thing at that Wacken festival, and we had Savatage play, then TSO a version play, and then all TSO musicians played on 2 stages at once there, and it was 80,000 people, and it was just crazy. I mean, it was something where you looked at it and it was just larger than life, and that was all Paul. I mean,
that's important that you say that, because it sounds like he thought about dividing and conquering was more important for the greater good of the art than just any one person, any one player, but that his vision, like whether you have to have 2 bands going across the country playing 2 shows a day, it's about spreading the message. And it seems like you guys have done that. Like, I mean, if you say about it on paper, like, hey, your band's going to be so big, you can pack the Centrum Center in Worcester, Massachusetts, 2 shows, and you're going to have another band playing simultaneously that's the same music, the same band, somewhere else in the country, selling out 2 shows a day. No one can replicate that. I don't even know where that exists. So that's just incredible testament to who he was.
Yeah, I mean, at that time of the year, too, we were challenged by the fact that, you know how it works. You're promoting a tour, you promote with radio. That's a big part of your promotions. The radio works with us with the charities. The radio does all these things, and our music hits radio stations after Halloween. It's like, and it usually stops at radio stations
a season,
after
for sure.
New Year's. So it's like, you've got this X amount of time to go make this happen. So it's like, well, how are we going to do that? And then it was like, let's clone ourselves, and that's where East and West came in, and it just wound up being, there's still places we could play. There could be multiple more TSOs. I mean, you can't get to Europe while you're covering the States, and you can't just like parts of North America. You can't. It's one of these things where it's a magical time of the year that music just happens to hit people in a certain way, and it's just the whole presentation in the show is just it's different, and it goes from the ages 8 to 80, and it reaches everybody. So it's kind of one of these things that you're not really limited to a year or a time, and every year there's still people who haven't seen it. I still look on the website and I'll see people saying, how are you playing in Pittsburgh and Tampa on the same day?
You're like Santa.
25 years later, still people don't know there's an East and West. I mean, it's amazing that when I'll be on stage and I'll talk to the crowd before about the charity stuff, and I'll say, how many people have never seen TSO before? And it's still 50% of the crowd raising their hands. So there's amazing a number of people that you could still reach with it. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our first hour, part 1. And I mean, what a highlight! Just TSO is such an unrivaled force. So I appreciate the insight into that and how you experienced that.
The execution of a dream is unparalleled.
Yeah, and we have a whole nother hour to talk, and I definitely want to get into kind of what you're up to now, especially with the Spirits of Fire stuff and your solo
because
work.
We'll be here till like 7:30, and I'll still be talking about TSO.
There's still a lot more. There's still a lot more.
You're
more
getting
to cover,
2020 because we're going to make people come back and listen to the rest of this, because I'm riveted. We get to talk to you in a second. They have to wait till later in the week. But that said, like, Chris, thank you for sharing your heart with us, bro.
I have lifetimes of stuff, and I didn't even hit a small amount of any of them.
I already have a lot of questions still, just based on what we've talked about so far.
We're going to continue our discussion in part 2, but Chris, just anything you want to let people know about right now? I know any social media. Is it Chris Caffery official? I think on Instagram, Twitter is just Chris Caffery.
Today there was another Chris Caffery fake on Instagram. You've
made it.
Yeah, no, I've had like 15 fakes. People have been faking.
You made it 15 times.
Yeah, but today, there's a new one today, and they always block me and message everybody as me. It's like, hi. I'm like, I don't even like people. Never mind, like, start. I'm not that way, but it's like I don't want to like just find random people and start saying, "Hey, I barely got time to do the lawn today." It's like, it's like I gotta sit there and.
And on that note, if it's not Chris Caffery official, it ain't Chris Caffery. Come back later this week. You've been 2020.
Well, there's a reason too. Like, I don't have the blue dot right now because I left Instagram because the Russians hacked my Instagram like 3.5 years ago. All of a sudden, one day I couldn't get on my Instagram. So I went to sign on it. It was taken, and there was a new email that got my Instagram. So I had to message Instagram and do the thing where you're holding they send you a number, you got to write it on a piece of paper and hold it. They need to verify it's you. Then they shut that down. And after that, I was just like, screw this. And I didn't go anywhere near it. And Instagram was kind of not rich. Facebook was still the thing at the time. I had 200,000 followers on my music page. So I bailed out of Instagram at like probably 15,000 followers and I just bailed on it. They're all gone. And then all of a sudden, everybody I know had like 20, 30,000 followers. Like, you got to get back to Instagram. And then TSO was doing a pay-per-view in 2020. And they're like, can you do this radio interview? And the radio guy's like, we do it as a link through Instagram. I'm like, all right, I'll go back. So I started back on the Instagram. And now I got like 11,000, followers or whatever, close to it. And I still don't have the blue dot, and I'm trying to explain to Instagram, who's owned by the same company as Facebook, that I'm the guy on Facebook with the blue dot. Why can't I get your freaking blue dot? And it's like, couldn't even report. I'm trying to report this guy as a fake today. And if you want to put as a public figure, you need to have the blue dot to report as that. So I can't even report myself as real because these bozos don't know how to make me real. Just put the fucking blue dot on. I mean,
so are you actually real? Who are we talking to here?
Instagram, if you're listening, give Chris the fucking blue dot.
Wilbur will get a blue dot before me.
All right.
He's more real than me.
Let's pick this up next week, 2020-d.com. Thanks again, Chris. We'll talk to you soon.
And I got to tell you, first of all, I'm in the string section. So the string section, there's 6 strings to help balance out the staging and also the sound of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I'm watching this show from the stage, and I did not understand the show. Like, I'm playing, and it's just like fog, and I can see different colors going on. But what I did understand in San Diego and Los Angeles at the Coliseum was a matinee and an evening show both sold out. Like, I understood the ticket sales. I'm like, something is going on with this band.